Let's kick things off. This is Interop Working Group call number 3. Thanks all for joining. Excited to get into it. Lots of good stuff to share today. And I just dropped the agenda in the chat for anyone that wants to take a closer look. Before we get into things, I guess I'll just quickly repeat my little mantra. Sorry, people are tired of hearing me say this, but I think and hope most here agree there's a lot of value in us being hyper focused on what we can ship in the next few months and delivering something that can get into the hands of users and solve real problems. Of course, it's also critical that we do this in a way that doesn't prevent us from achieving our longer term objectives. So my ask, I guess, is only that everyone in this group helps us stay focused on these things, tries to keep conversations moving forward, which I think we've actually done a really great job on so far, all things considered. And yeah, just please keep speaking up about the best ways we can all coordinate on this to unify Ethereum. Okay, so yeah, with that said, let's kick off with the first agenda item, updates from the message passing group. Ellie, maybe you can start here, and then, of course, anyone else, please feel free to jump in.
Um, yeah, could I share my screen real quick?
Yeah, sorry, 1 second. Let me do that. There you go.
Okay, perfect. Okay, yeah, so I recently just pushed a PR to the GitHub, which I know we'll talk about in a bit, but this outlines the kind of like status of the message passing working group, and so I'll kind of go over it, and then a couple of other points. So the working group, message passing working group right now is focused on like a dev interface or a dev API so that developers have a single way, a unified way to interact with cross-chain applications. Even though the actual protocols connecting chains underneath that are going to be different depending on which chains you're connecting. So um, so here's kind of like the plan I propose for us going forward, and people can let me know what they think. So while we work on this dev API, that can be like one task. In parallel, I think it's really useful for us to work on using the like existing protocols in place. So for example, um, maybe we can like make new ISMs for Hyperlane or things like that that are have different properties. And I think that this is important because it gives us like meaningful progress in the meantime, and we can like still improve interop in the meantime while we're like deciding on this dev API. Realistically, the dev API, even if we decide on it quite soon, it's going to take a long time to implement and have a lot of these core projects adopt it. So like in the meantime, we can work on providing more secure or different kind of security assumptions underlying messaging protocols using the existing APIs. Because this brings me to, I guess, I think a concern that I have is that the idea of a dev API, in my opinion, is very, very good. But having applications need to upgrade to it is kind of a really big ask. So this is something that we need to discuss in the working group and discuss maybe the best way going forward. Maybe we can take parts of existing protocols and reuse them to kind of make these things easier. Okay, so that being said, here's kind of like my proposed timeline for just working on the dev API itself. And then in parallel, projects themselves like Espresso can work on integrating with these other protocols. So the timeline is that, so first I want to identify like core contributors. So I think that basically have a small group of people that kind of are really active in Telegram and meet on a regular basis to push things forward. And then every once in a while, that small group will present to the broader group, like our proposal for feedback. I think that this works because then no, like the broader group doesn't have to follow along in this like huge Telegram chat, and we have something concrete for people to give feedback on. So I want to like develop or identify these core contributors and then like move forward with the message passing group that way. Um, the first thing task is that we're going to do is we are going to revisit like the goals and the properties of the dev API. This is because as we have been discussing, the goals that we thought we wanted like a month ago have actually changed, and we realized that something else is more useful. So we're going to go through and agree on the goals. The idea, thanks to Skeletor for this idea, but the idea is that like in this GitHub, we can actually document like the people who agree, the reasons why they agree, the reasons why they disagree. So this is all documented. It's not just in Telegram. And then we kind of actually have like proof of consensus uh, that people agree on us moving forward. Um, so yeah, basically the timeline is we're going to agree on these key things, and then I feel like by the end of March, like people should be able to start actually implementing this, if not earlier. And basically we'll have an interface finalized. Um, the other part that I want to do is kind of establishing commitments and timelines for some core projects to adopt the API. I think this is going to be a bit of a difficult task, but like if we actually want this API to be useful, the like major projects need to adopt it, and that's very important that we get their buy-in. So this is also a goal that the working group is doing right now. So just quick, I wrote down the goals for us to discuss. I'd say if you want to kind of be in this like smaller working group, it'll still exist in the same Telegram channel, probably just like maybe like let me know. And the goal is that it's going to be very, very active, and then like once a week we'll present kind of to the broader group. So with that, that's kind of the update on the message passing group. Does anybody have any comments on that proposal? Okay, we can go to the next group.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ellie. Any other updates, comments, questions? Otherwise, I think we may actually just keep going to the next agenda item. Anyone has anything they want to add now, let me know or jump in. Cool. All right. 1 second. Cool. Sorry, agenda item number 2. So we have a new repo for L2 Interop, which is great. Kindly, the folks from Wonderland have jumped in to help us to put this up and organize it, but this really is intended to be an open repo for anyone to jump into. It's living in the Ethereum org for now, for neutrality, but maybe in the future we'll spin it out to its own thing. Yeah, so we will have the Wonderland folks here today to do a quick walkthrough of the repo.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, and also thanks, Ellie, for the first PR. I mean, as Josh said, this repo is, and Ellie as well, like, it's just a matter of having things documented and easily accessible for everyone. I mean, we want this to be kind of the single source of truth. There are a couple of things. I'm not sure if it's even worth to share screen. It's pretty straightforward. Like you go into the repo, usually you will see documents under the docs folder. We'll try to index everything as much as we can. But the coolest part is actually under projects or on the issues. And there, like everything is pretty like new and rough. Like it's mostly a work in progress, and we really appreciate if you guys do have like any feedback or any improvements or whatever, or you want to start adding like new tasks into the project board. There is a template to do that. So whenever you create an issue, you can just choose that template. It should guide you pretty well, or you can use the existing issues / tasks as an example. So yeah, so the thing is, yeah, I mean, we still are kind of in this process of trying to organize everything and trying to kind of always bring back the focus into what should be, say, not important, but should be kind of the first lowest hanging fruits to tackle. One of the key things that we been figuring out this past week is that intents is something that kind of merges all the categories that we currently have. But it's something that we shouldn't really rush through since there are still a bunch of things that we need to define. But I think that's a good carrot or incentive for us to try to tackle the other, let's say, the chain specific addresses or the message passing, or similarly kind of a standard for settlements. So I think, yeah, I mean, sorry for rambling a little bit, but the thing is, go into the repo. If there is something that you find is incorrect, also feel free to review the PRs. Super welcome. Or if whatever you find that you want to add any information, as well as Ellie did, just submit a PR. We'll try to get more reviewers. Right now it's only Josh and us, but if anyone wants to also review things, more than welcome. Go Zero.
Apologies if we already moved on from the message passing discussion, but I wanted to bring up.
We can go back to that really quickly. Sure. Yeah.
One thing I've been thinking about a little bit, starting to work with message passing a little more in depth. One component that I think would be incredibly valuable to standardize around would be an interface to basically enable simulation of the message. What I mean by that is, if there is an interface that you can call and provide the same arguments that you would call to provide to the standard function, and the response that it gives back is, here's the chain identifier, whatever we end up using for that. Here's the address. Here's like the from address on that chain that this message is going to kick off. Here's the data that it's going to provide. Here's the to address that it's going to call. Here's any value that it's going to add. Here's the gas that it's going to provide if it's relevant. Something like that. Because then if you're about to interact with a contract that in turn interacts with a cross-chain messaging contract, or maybe the contract you're about to interact with is the cross-chain messaging contract, so often what you are doing is contingent on the message that's being received on the destination chain actually working and doing what you think it's going to do. Like a really relevant example is a cross-chain swap. If I'm going to go fill on a fill chain somewhere, I'm hoping that the message communicating that I filled it gets back, and then I can claim tokens, right? Or receive tokens back. If for some reason that cross-chain message is going to revert, then I will avoid doing the fill in the first place. And I also want to look and see what's going to happen back on the chain where I'll claim, so that I can work out what price I need to provide or whatever. So some component, it might be specific to these relay-based messages, but even in the case where it's not a concrete relay, even if it's like a superchain interop, right? This method could still just provide the exact mechanics of what's going to be triggered on the output chain, and I think would really help with building confidence on the solver side when you are triggering cross-chain messages.
That's a good idea. Do you imagine that would cost money though?
I think it would be a view function that you would call.
It's a little hard, right? Because the underlying infra still needs to like do work for you. So the caller would probably have to compensate for that work.
Potentially. I mean, you could, if the assumption is that there is some kind of fixed relayer, then you could provide that. If the relayer is variable, like it could be selected from a number of things, then you could just provide like a null address, basically saying we don't know, that it could be anyone. For the data in particular, I think in the vast majority of cases, the data is going to be fixed, right? If the data that's being relayed is variable somehow, then yeah, I mean the one catch here is many of these relayers do have like an ID that gets incremented or a nonce that gets incremented as you call it. So that could change. And I think that's okay to basically say this is a snapshot, point in time, best guess, just by running the code on the origin chain of what is going to be relayed. And if there's extra work required, then there's not a hard expectation that that's going to be available, but there's still a standardized way to get you part of the way there and not have to, because otherwise you have to roll your own implementation of this by digging into the internals of whatever the protocol or the service that's running the relay, right?
Well, are you trying to simulate like
Can I
execute?
just, sorry, can I really jump in here? I'm not sure, like, this is a really good discussion, but I'm not sure it needs to have like everybody on this call having it.
That is so true and a good point.
Can we move
I
it to the
don't
Telegram
mean to
chat?
derail
That'd be
the
great.
agenda, but I just wanted to bring this up, and we should take it to a more appropriate
Yeah, thank
subforum.
you. Thank you, Zero.
I would even say, like, if you have a draft spec or an idea draft or whatever, do a PR on GitHub, and then like if we can reference that and discuss it on Telegram, that would be even better.
Yeah, it's always good to have like a concrete thing to reference. 100%.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you all. Yeah, thanks, Urage and CJ and Ellie for helping keep us on track here. Cool. Let's, if nothing else, we can, yeah, we can keep going. Cool. So let me just check one thing real quick, but yeah, I think we're ready for the third agenda item here, which is, yeah, we have a few presentations from teams all under this general theme of accelerating intents everywhere for Ethereum. There's been a lot of great progress on the intents front, even just in the past 2 weeks, which has been really exciting for me to see. So yeah, I guess let's just let's get into it. And I actually need to share my screen here, so let me do that real quick. All right. All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yep, looks good.
Cool, thanks. Cool, sorry. So yeah, so what's the goal here? Again, accelerate intents everywhere and ship something in 2025. What are the needs and must-haves of this? We need to ship near-term solutions and do so in a way that plays nicely with our shared long-term objectives, aka don't destroy the uniquely valuable properties of Ethereum, and finding the fastest path to getting trustless cross-chain sends in the hands of users in the next few months. So what's the problem here? Well, intents are great. It's not a silver bullet, of course, but probably most agree here on what they do really well. The problem is it can take a while to get to new chains, and at the end of the day, we need all of the flavors of intent-based interop to be compatible with each other. That's sort of the name of the game. So how do we do that? We need a shared, neutral, open intents framework that makes it easy for every team that wants to adopt intents for their own flavors of interop, while also maintaining broad compatibility. And again, let's get it into the hands of users. So intents are accelerating. This is great. Just in the past 2 weeks, here's a quick overview of a few things that's happened. Not exhaustive, of course. Sorry for any teams that are not here. Please reach out to me if you have things and want to make sure it's shared. tried just to have a quick sampling here and from teams that did reach out. And all of this here on the screen will be demoed shortly here on the call in a few minutes. So there is a common pattern emerging. This is something that I've been discussing with many people in the Interop working group. What are these common patterns that are emerging, and how do we better work together? Well, the common pattern is probably not a huge surprise to folks here. Yeah, standard to describe intents, the solver implementations, and the settlement systems. Okay, so how do we turn these common patterns into a shared standard? Well, that's the tricky part of Interop, especially in a large, diverse community with strong opinions and tokens. But great news is we have a path forward here. This is not, I guess, just to be clear, and I'll repeat this a few times, this is not intended to be the be-all, end-all that every chain everywhere for all time must implement, of course. This is simply a reference implementation and a framework to try to unify the efforts. This defines the standard for intents. This framework that we'll get more into in a second here plays nicely with 7683, for example, and provides for multiple reference solver implementations and settlement systems. And if anyone has questions or comments, sorry, I should say, feel free to jump in at any point during this presentation. Just a couple more slides here. So the open intents framework. This is something, again, that anyone in Ethereum can contribute to and improve. There is, for sure, much to improve. Again, just an initial reference implementation with more to follow, and a canvas that every L2 and Interop team can and should add on to. To me, this is a critical piece that in order for us to achieve this sort of broadly valuable thing. What is it not? This is not an enshrined implementation, just a framework. And the goal is to inspire more and more experimentation, but in a way that is actually more broadly productive. And also should give credit to all of the efforts that are underway that are pushing in this direction. And we'll get into this here in a second, but many teams have been pushing forward with intents and other things for a long time. Again, intents and this framework not intended to be, come in here and be the magical solution that will solve Interop for all time, but it's more around this goal of let's move forward, let's maintain momentum, let's ship things in the next few months, and let's unite all of the Interop efforts underway to the extent possible. Status, opening this up now, this meaning the intents framework, still early days, let's move quickly and find the best path to making this adoptable and extendable by any team that wants it. A few just really, these are not intended to be sort of official splashy announcement here, but teams that have already expressed their interest to support and be a part of the open intents framework here at the bottom. Again, this is all happening in the past 24 hours, so I'm sorry if I did not reach out to you. This was me kind of scrambling at the last minute to have conversations with teams. Not intended to be in any sort of order of priority. I would love to have more conversations with teams. Please, I'll reach out. Please reach out to me. This is me again, just kind of scrambling to check with teams at the last minute. But yeah, excited to have a lot of support, and excited and relieved to see people just being very open to adopting this framework. Cool. Well, that's it. That's my quick overview before I hand it over to the first demo, which is actually Nam from Hyperlane, who has been huge, instrumental in this open intents framework. I guess before I hand it over, any quick questions, comments, feedback before we keep going with the demos?
Maybe just a small question from my side. I think it's important to have the intents framework itself. There's a lot of intent frameworks out there kind of competing for how to do things. How much are you thinking also about the solver side? Because what I heard from a lot of people is that eventually the solver side is where the problem lies. You can adopt different intent frameworks, you just need solvers. So what do you think about that?
Agreed. This may actually be a good segue for Nam to jump in. Not to put you on the spot, Nam, but you might have a more eloquent answer to this.
Yeah.
I think I would maybe answer your question. Like, I think, or maybe to make the question even bigger, which is, I think there's a lot of work to be done, right? And I think to echo what Josh said, like the framework I think that we and a lot of other people have been working on is not meant to like be the solution that just like has solved everything now and like we all can go home. I think the goal is just to have a like shared substrate where we can all work together, right? That is like incredibly neutral, like fully open source, like. Because I think one of the reasons why we started working on this was basically like, hey, we also wanted to have intents everywhere. But it turns out building all of this is very hard. And when I was talking with other folks, including Josh, right, like I think it just like turned like we just learned that like there's so many like shared abstractions and tooling that everybody could benefit from that like currently do not exist. And so part of I think what you say, right, is like, yeah, for solvers, right, like what are the like shared tooling and infrastructure that we need to create to make it easier for solvers. But also, right, like if you are like in a new L2 ecosystem, right, and like you are now wanting to create intents everywhere, like you basically end up oftentimes building the whole stack yourself. And so the goal of what we've been working on with the EF, with a team called Bootnode, is to kind of like start with a very like rudimentary basis that is super modular so that people can come in and add kind of their own flavors of it to it so that we don't end up all, like you said, having like a lot of different approaches that are like hard to kind of like, where we duplicate a lot of efforts, I guess. So maybe, not sure if I answered your question, Eric, but maybe if I can share my screen real quick. I think I've been talking with a bunch of y'all on the call here about this, but maybe it's easiest to actually just go through the kind of like post that we've been working with a bunch of you guys on. But currently, the state of the framework is really three things. It's an open source solver implementation, right? So it's like one that supports not only the like smart contracts that are in the framework, but also other protocols such as Eco, such as the Compact. And the idea is that like, right, like if you build an intent protocol, like you can easily have this framework solver like supported so that people who use this reference solver can easily run it for these different protocols. It also contains super composable smart contracts, and I will dig into the GitHub in a bit real quick. But the idea is that, right, like a lot of us on this call are working on L2s, are working on settlement mechanisms that make it much faster and better and less trusted than a lot of the multi-sig approaches that are out there today, right? And again, the idea is that like the implementation that exists right now in the framework is not meant as like, oh, this is done. It's meant to allow all these different settlement mechanisms to have an easy place to add their module so that they can deploy these intent experiences themselves. And it also has a very easy built UI template to like obviously expose those intents to the users. And so the goal here is think of it really as like a bunch of pieces of Legos that people can kind of mix and match together so that they can have intents on, again, their ecosystem, on their L2, but also do that in a way that allows people, like that allows these intents to kind of work across Ethereum. And obviously like 7683 is a very big part of it. Maybe to just quickly show, like when we started working on this, right, like when we took a couple of months ago, when we took the leap of faith to kind of like fund this effort based on ideas that we've had with the EF, like the hyperlane part, from hyperlane, is like just one contract, right? Like most of the logic is in these two like base 7683 contracts. And so as a settlement mechanism, right, like if you are like OP Superchain, if you are like Arbitrum's broadcast standard, if you're Espresso, if you're Polymer, right, like all you have to do is implement a single contract like this, where you override these two, basically you override the settle, and then you like actually settle the order. Like that's all you have to do. And now you have basically a fully working intent smart contracts on your intent settlement system specifically, right? And then on the solver side, there's kind of these different modules here. And again, like now the reference solver can support your like intents. And so the goal here was to have a, to basically have a substrate, like a canvas, I think like Josh called it, right? To allow people to basically innovate on intents without having to reinvent the whole wheel all by themselves. And so, yeah, as part of the effort, we've been already working with, right, like Eco, like I said, to kind of like support it in the protocol. We've been working with, right, like 0H to have the solver solve in the compact.
with Hashi, like the Hashi's Oracle could be like another settlement option in this framework, right? Like part of the Arbitrum announcement last week, right, was for Nomial to offer loans for solvers, right? To answer your question, Alrik, to make it easier to have less inventory for solvers on these chains. And that could be, again, like a reference implementation of that integration in the open framework solver, right? Like rebalancing, right? Like making more rebalancing tooling for solvers will make solvers' lives easier. And so there's a lot of kind of like opportunity to have these kind of like shared abstractions that we all work on together, right? For example, like transaction indexing, transaction submission, right? Like these are all things that are very hard, but that I think we together, I think can work on. And so I just wanted to quickly like add with like one more demo, which is again, this open template. It's totally like not tied to any particular settlement mechanism, can be used in the framework to have working intents by just basically overriding that one smart contract to have intents in, right? Like all of the L2 ecosystems across Ethereum widely. And I think what's really like strong about hopefully us all working together on this is that it really plays into the strengths of Ethereum, where, right, like I think we've always had this kind of notion of like innovating, right? Like working on similar things, but innovating in different directions and improving by having people experiment with different approaches. And I think if the demo works, then I think here on my, never mind. Okay, I guess that's what happens to live demos. I swear it just worked 40 minutes ago. Yeah, I think that's all I have. And again, this is just a very early, this is just the first step of hopefully many for all of us to come together and work on shared abstractions to make, intents be everywhere in Ethereum. I'll take questions.
Can you clarify how this relates to 7683 and across, just like as one example, like where does this fit?
Yes, right. So 7683 obviously is the right, like the most widest supported intent standard that we have right now, and that's the reason why we started with a reference 7683 implementation, right? Like when you inherit from that contract, like I said, you basically get 7683 compatible like protocol. And so but the idea is also that the framework can obviously support, right, like different protocols, for example, ecos, for example, the compact, right? Like we've been talking with Jack from Base about 7755. The idea is definitely to like have kind of like shared building blocks that people can use, mix and match, where kind of like serves their goals, while we all have these kind of like shared building blocks that help us all, but we don't have to reinvent the whole stack, if that makes sense.
And how does this relate to an existing protocol, like across? Like, would this replace it or integrate with it?
Definitely does not replace, for sure, right? Like I think the idea is to like just have shared tooling to make it easier even to, right, like build with across, to like integrate with across, to have a solver work like solving for a cross protocol, right? Like one thing, for example, that the framework does not address at all is like, right, like how does the user intent get communicated to the like solver, right? Like how does like an intent get maybe auctioned off to a solver? Like those are all things that like there can be shared abstraction APIs that we can work on together, right? And of which then across, for example, is one of possibly many implementations. But we just make it easier for people when they build within this framework to not be like on their own island completely independently.
And Nam, I think my demo will showcase how this all fits together very nicely.
Love it.
Cool. Any other questions for Nam? Or maybe Hart, since you recently spoke, we could just go straight to you here. And just quickly, are you ready? I can also quickly share. I just wanted to repeat the quote from Mark from Optimism. yeah, he is supportive of the open intents framework. You can read the quote there in the chat. Couldn't make the call today, but it's been great to see just generally that yeah, we have more and more people jumping in and supporting the initiative. So thank you to Mark.
Sweet. Can you guys see my screen?
We can. Perfect.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, I'll go next then. So how does this fit together? So I'm stealing a couple slides from my DevCon presentation here. And across co-authored 7683 with Uniswap and with Mark, that Mark Toda was like one of the main authors on this, which Josh just was speaking about his quotes there. So we quoted the standard for cross-chain intents. And my mental model for this is to think of it like an order ticket. Like you fill out the fields, fill in your details of what you want to do, and then you just send it into the network and it gets done. And so all the complexity about how this intent gets settled, all the trust assumptions, all the solver network, it all gets abstracted away. So the developer just has this simple experience of, I fill out this intent and it gets filled. And in our spec, if you go to erc7683.org, you'll see like this is what the spec looks like. On the call 2 weeks ago, we're like, hey, has this got to production yet? And so what I wanted to kind of demonstrate is 7683 in production, and then we'll go deeper into how this flows super nicely into this open intent framework. So in this spec, we got to specify a fill deadline, an order data type, which is the EIP 712 type hash, and then just this order data field that includes the information of what you want to do in the intent. And we have this is a very simple script that basically does the ABI encoding of this order data. I ran this ahead of time, and I've got a few data fields to fill in. And just to show you guys this all live in production, I can go to this 7683 contract. This is on base right here. And I can write my order data. What this is going to do is send, if I go back here, it's going to send 10 USDC from base to chain 42161, which is Arbitrum, paying like a tiny fee. So let's see, live demo gods. Let's see if this works for me. See how this goes. But to start off here, we can show that on base, I've got a little bit of ETH. I've got some USDC. On Arbitrum in this account, I got ETH and no USDC. So on production, let me write, oops, sorry, wrong button. Let me write my intent to base here.
It's probably not gonna work. You need to make
Why
sure
not?
your deadline. Because if you need to regenerate your deadline. I can paste a deadline in
I
that's
think it worked because I updated it a few minutes ago. But let's see.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
worked.
I thought the failure to estimate gas was gonna say it was gonna fail.
Yeah. No. I updated this. So okay. So this got filled. Here's my deposit transaction on base. If I go over to Arbitrum, let's see. There we go. I've got my $10 on Arbitrum. And if I look, let's see, this got filled the 10-second mark relative to, wait, where was I? So from 9 seconds to 10 seconds, it took 1 second to do our fill here. So pretty good performance, 7683 in production. Anyone can go to Etherscan or Basescan and execute these intents, which we think is kind of cool. And so, yeah, we'll be putting out a blog post, like documentation, documenting how this works. But I wanted to kind of just give some context of like this framework is exactly what Nam has been talking about. There's like the application layer that's creating the intent. There's a solver layer that's like maximally competitive filling these intents. And I can actually maybe speak for a second on solver competition. Maybe I'll come back to that. And then there's this many settlement layers, many of these ERC 7683 settlement layers that in my world, they should reach all the corners of the L2, L3 Ethereum ecosystem so that we have like day one permissionless coverage to get intents everywhere. And at my DevCon presentation, we spoke of this. We spoke about 7683 being purposely designed to be modular in its settlement architecture. This settlement system is meant to be a Lego block. I literally put the Lego block in my slide back in November. And it can support superchain interop. We're working with the superchain team on a settlement system that would do this when it ships. It can support egg layer interop. It can support the storage proofs that Jack and the team at Base are putting out. It literally can the standard is designed to support any type of messaging layer to verify these intents, just like what Nam was talking about. And yeah, so from our perspective, this open intent framework is just the natural extension of 7683. From developers, for both the app and wallet developers, we get this common format to do whatever you want cross-chain. For solvers, this intent framework is defining multiple solver reference implementations. Nam's written a solver reference implementation. We have one as well. I think his blog post will link to both of them. And then for chains, this framework is just embracing and encouraging competition and experimentation in settlement system design, which will let us bring intents to all the corners of Ethereum from day one. So my hope, right, at DevCon, we got a lot of people to support 7683. We have this big logo wall of people supporting this standard for cross-chain intents. I'm hopeful we can push the open intent framework forward and get the same sort of support with this being this open, credibly neutral framework that all of us in the space can take our own work, our own projects, our own technology and contribute to. Be it like an L2 ecosystem supporting these standards or these interop messaging passing protocols being able to pass messages. So that's my Unify Ethereum bit. And what I maybe also wanted to touch on, just because there was, a question around solvers and solver competition. This is just some data from the first few hours of Unichain, just launched on Tuesday. And one of the things that's actually kind of cool about it is, first of all, Uniswap wanted to keep Unichain secret. Like no one knew about the RPC endpoints much ahead of time at all. And even in the first few hours, we had like median fill times going to Unichain of 3 seconds. The P90 fill time was 4 seconds with 8 unique solvers showing up. And I thought this was pretty cool because in like literally just the first few hours, the mechanism behind this intent architecture inspired many independent, completely autonomous relayers or solvers to show up and compete to fill users with like exceedingly fast times for like a brand new chain, which I thought was pretty cool. Anyways, that's my presentation. And yeah, I'm pretty stoked that we've got 7683 in production right now.
Thank you, Hart. Cool. Spencer from Arbitrum, are you free to jump in now?
Yeah. So
Thank you.
I'm Spencer. I'm a product manager at Off-Chain Labs. Last week, we announced a blog post for the Universal Intent Engine. This kind of came about from the notion that 90% of desired interop today is cross-chain token transfers and swaps. It's acknowledgement that all the components for interop exist right now today, and the only thing that's missing is the actual alignment of L2 stacks to formalize these and get them everywhere. This aligns with the open intent framework in the same notion that we have the ability to express our own opinions on what the actual design is and make sure it's actually implemented by every EVM chain. In doing so, we have interop. I mean, if you just watch the demo right there, it's pretty clear we have interop right now. And I think that it's just not being communicated appropriately distilled to the right, like media firms, what have you. But intents make sense because this fulfills a valid use case right now. And the universal intent engine is our commitment to making sure that we can proliferate intents everywhere. Probably sometime next week, we're going to be publishing what we call the cross-chain broadcaster. This is a trustless message passing protocol, and we think it's very unopinionated and widely applicable to any EVM chain without customizations to how an L2 works. I do not have a presentation today, but I just want to spread the word and announce that we're fully in support of the open intent framework, and we're looking forward to building this all in public with you.
Amazing. Thank you, Spencer. Cool. Last up, Khan from T1.
Hey everyone. Actually, my name is pronounced John. It's Turkish. So, great to see so many familiar faces. I'm not going to be doing a demo, but I'm going to be discussing what an alternative settlement system can look like for these 7683 or open intent bridges. Can I share my screen?
Yep, you should be able to.
Yeah. All right. So I guess maybe a bit of background about what we do. We're building a trusted execution environment enabled rollup that can produce real-time proofs today and not wait for the ZK research to catch up. And we believe this is like the single biggest unblocker to solve our fragmentation issues. And we also, think that this can bring some interesting rollup interop benefits. But you all know this. Like what we do is we run our runtime in a TE, and then we can prove T1 execution back to Ethereum within 12 seconds. And we also do something that's like different than the traditional rollups that are out there. We're running partner rollup full nodes in addition to an L1 full node in the T1 node infrastructure. So right now we're doing Ethereum Sefolia and Arbitrum Sefolia. And what that allows us to do is we can, by following the Arbitrum sequencer, we can re-execute Arbitrum state and be aware of what's going on in Arbitrum inside T1. And, we can post those proofs back to the L1 within a few L1 slots. And yeah, security-wise, today we depend on TEs, but I've been working with TEs since 2018. I started Secret Network, which was the first production TE project. We have a plan to, add defense in depth and still achieve real-time proving, which is like proving in one L1 block. And we can get into that, but like not to shield too much. How we think about intents with T1 is I think there are two main areas that we are excited about. The first one is, real-time proving enables faster verification and therefore faster payment to solvers, and this tremendously increases capital efficiency that we have. And another area that is interesting for us is, I briefly touched on this earlier, but we have, we run other rollups full nodes. We have deposit contracts on other rollups that read, requests from our Ethereum L1 bridge contract. But what that means is, like, unlike a traditional rollup, like we don't enforce that if you come to T1 from Ethereum, you only have to go to Ethereum, but you can go from anywhere. And that creates a liquidity mismatch, right? If I come from Ethereum and if I go from Arbitrum, someone who came from Arbitrum may not have the funds to go out. And integrating something like 7683 in that setup creates tremendous capital efficiency for us, because we're no longer like fully bound by the liquidity of our bridge contracts, assuming we have solvers in those places. So to tap into the first one, I think you all know this, how 7683 works, but what we're saying is, the origin chain and the destination chain can be, T1 partner rollups. We would have full nodes running, we'll have follower nodes of these rollups running in our node infrastructure, so we can verify Alice's deposit to escrow and the filler's performance on T1, and therefore release the funds to the filler, I'm hoping in a minute or so, with taking some reorg risk. I do acknowledge that. But yeah, I guess across, one of the products I love dearly, and Hart, thank you for building such a cool thing, requires 60 minutes for solvers to, or like the optimistic challenge period, and that's that makes life more difficult for solvers because they need to have funds to fill for 60 minutes of demand. And if you can reduce that to repayment to a minute, then they need to hold less funds basically. And yeah, that's what we're working on. We're putting together a prototype as we're speaking now, and it's super cool. I mean, I am new to the game compared to most of you guys, but it's super cool that this initiative is going on, that we can, plug in our settlement system to the work that you're doing, and, just push the experimentation that is going on in the space. Yeah, I did some back of the envelope calculation. This is super basic, and I have bad, oversimplified assumptions. But basically the idea is this is yesterday. Across did 5,300 transactions for 11.5 million on Ethereum. So if you believe all the transactions are equal in size and happen in equal intervals, you have a bridging request every 16 seconds, almost $2,200. And if you pay a solver in 60 minutes, the solver needs to have 480K to meet all the demands. If you pay a solver every minute, you basically cut that by 60. And this is obviously a theoretical limit, but just gives some idea of how we can make these systems more efficient. So I'll pause there, and thank you everyone for your time.
Thanks, John.
Can I just jump in and say how awesome I think this is, and how aligned I feel for us, if we can, this is another settlement system that just makes intents better. So we want to repay solvers faster. And if we can go again, more innovation on these settlement layers, just kind of awesome. So
amazing.
This.
Yeah, we're not in the business of building bridges. So if we can support in any way, we'll have our DevNet coming up in a month or so. So yeah, we have our channels, let's jam.
Awesome. Cool. I do want to save thank you again, and I do want to save the final 5 minutes that we have here. Bo from Polymer put together a helpful doc that he would like to quickly walk through. So Bo, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I shared a doc in the L2 Interop chat to open some discussion around the goals of the open intents framework, aligning on those, and some of the issues that we saw when we actually dug into the implementation differences and how they would diverge between different protocols. The doc is meant to start the conversation around this. Perhaps we can continue the actual discussion async in the intents working group. And I encourage different teams to add their team's perspective to the doc for discussion. The Catalyst team has added their point of view on this effort as well at the bottom of the doc. So I encourage more folks to participate.
Cool. Thank you. In the final 2-3 minutes here, any quick parting thoughts, feedback, comments, questions for next time? Cool. Well, let's keep the discussion going async then. We can end it a couple minutes early, actually. Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.